We're at the Little Rock, Arkansas Secular Student Alliance Conference. And Zach, you're here from Texas.
I am. San Antonio.
Physics and
major.
philosophy. What a wonderful combination. So we may have just lost half our audience. I just realized it's all tilted. Yeah. So tell me about how you got here. What's why are you in SSA, or how did you end up coming into SSA? I'm guessing you weren't in this SSA when you were in like 4th grade.
No, I wasn't. Actually, it's kind of a funny story. I wanted to start an SSA chapter when I was in high school.
So you were in pretty early though.
Yeah, I was probably, because I went to one high school for 2 years. I was in a magnet program, because I've been in magnet programs since middle school.
Yeah.
It was like a whole rocketry and science one.
Yeah.
And then I went to my first high school, and it's like all their funding started getting cut. Like there was all these issues with management and like embezzlement stuff.
Yeah.
But when I moved to my other high school, I learned about the SSA, and I tried to start a chapter. I started going through the process and like forms and setting up, but then COVID hit, so I wasn't able to do it. And then went to college, and I found that there was a chapter there. In fact, I was there for when they were reconstructing. So I helped get the chapter back off the ground.
There's deconstruction, and now there's reconstruction. Did you have any kind of religious background, or were you pretty much secular growing up?
Pretty much secular growing up. I grew up in San Antonio. I grew up around religion. I'd been to church once or twice, prayed going to sleep whenever I was more of a kid.
Really?
Bless you. I'm trying not to overload your microphone.
Oh yes, thanks. Woo. Was were your parents religious or no?
They're not really.
No.
But
there was some prayer or something?
There was, but it was mostly just that it was tradition, and at some point they realized, why are we doing this? Yeah. And at some point we just kind of stopped. There wasn't a big, we're not going to pray anymore.
They weren't like going to a church and then made a big decision and stopped.
No. There was one time, it was more of a like, our grandparents invited us out one time.
Yeah.
And their church, their little church, it had a service, and then they had a picnic. But they changed pastors, and the new one that they got in was a little more vitriolic, and so we're not going to that church again, is what they said.
The grandparents or the parents?
The parents.
Okay.
Yeah.
So your grandparents were Christian or are Christian?
They are, yeah.
And but your parents were. So did your parents? Do you think they would describe themselves as atheists, or not really any kind of description?
I don't think they really have a description.
Like maybe they believe in God, but not the standard way or something? Or?
Yeah, and part of that does come from like they just don't like to like. I don't know their stories, so I can't tell it.
Okay,
is the best way to put it.
Good answer.
Yeah,
I was just curious because you tend to know. I mean, I could say my dad was pretty serious about his Catholicism. You know, they would say devout in the Catholic world, but my mom was mostly irreligious, not an atheist or anything, and. Occasionally we would go to church, but I've lived with her and felt like I didn't really believe any of it, thought it was a joke. So your perception of Christianity then when you were growing up was, did you, like when you were in middle school and high school, were you like, these people are nuts, or were you just sort of like, didn't really have an opinion about it, didn't think about it? When did you start kind of processing more seriously?
5th grade, I think, is the first time when I actually thought about like, what would this actually mean? Like, what would God be? And part of it is that Christianity existed in my life, but I never really had heard about it. It's just that this is something that existed in the background. In fact, that's why, because I frequently engage with like preachers that, like, we have a bunch of preachers that come to our college.
Yeah.
There was a bill passed in 2018 it's like, it allows people to just come onto college campuses, and as long as they aren't causing any damage or being too disruptive, they can just do whatever they want. And so I engage with them fairly often. But one of my things is that I'm a case study for lack of belief from the beginning. It's like the whole, the Word of God is written on our hearts, and the morality. It's like, well, I didn't believe to begin with, and I don't see anything there right now.
Yeah.
And so it's a fun thing to pull out.
Yeah.
But overall, mostly just neutral sort of background stuff.
Yeah.
I started to get sucked into new atheist stuff a little bit, but it's really easy to recognize the toxicity of a lot of the stuff that went on.
Okay. With like Hitchens and Dawkins and stuff, you mean?
Yeah. Well, Hitchens a little less so. My main issue is with Dawkins and with Harris.
Okay.
Dan, was it Denchel? Because there was like four
Dennett?
Daniel Dennett, sorry.
Yeah.
I can never remember.
He's a philosopher who just passed away a couple weeks ago.
Yeah, I heard about that. No, Daniel Dennett, amazing guy. I haven't seen as much as I'd like to of him. I know he was one of the Four Horsemen, but my primary issue with Harris and Dawkins is the Islamophobia.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah, it's.
I mean, it's what birthed the new atheists, right?
I feel like part of it
was a reaction to 9/11.
Yeah, and that's also why I'm more hesitant towards Dawkins or towards Hitchens, but more so than Harris and Dawkins. Hitchens did a much better job.
So Hitch had a little bit of influence on you.
He had a little bit, yeah.
I once, true story, I was part of organizing a debate with Hitchens, and he was getting his treatment for cancer. So I was tasked with going on we had chartered a private jet, and I flew to DC and picked him up.
Wow.
And then we flew out west for the debate. And it was, and then had to bring him back home. And it was quite an interesting time, just being able to talk to him personally for a while. So anyway, go ahead.
Yeah, and
you were saying that they had a little bit of an influence at one point in kind of shaping some of your reactions to Christianity and religion in general.
Yeah, I don't subscribe to it as much. I think that
Why wouldn't their Christophobia bother you as much as the Islamophobia?
Well, part of it is that the Islamophobia is definitely more rooted in more outright racism. Negative response to Christianity, especially in the United States, is more of a response to conservative Christianity.
Yeah.
A lot of people are perfectly fine with like either apolitical or progressive Christians.
Yeah.
There's not much reaction to that.
Right.
But Islamophobia, at least as it exists, it treats all Muslims as conservative Muslims.
Yeah.
I would be wrong to say that all Christians are like woman-hating, racist, like authoritarians, because most of them aren't, and it's the same issue with Muslims. And so Islamophobia, at least as it exists today, is more derived in racism than anything else, as a response to 9/11.
So we've interviewed some Muslims, for the podcast, and also I've known some of the local imams where we're from in Alabama, and an imam who's I won't mention who it was, but this is probably 5 years ago. He knew Hillary Clinton, and I was asking him how do you, because I knew from his conversation he was pretty traditionalist Muslim, and he was definitely not just a secular Muslim. And I said, your views are very conservative morally, right? But you are kind of a darling with the left. And he was very popular. It was interviewed and did events and things. And I said, but actually your moral views in some ways are a lot closer to the like religious right. So how do you end up on the left if you're, and he said to me, it's crazy. He said, the religious right has problems with me, because of 9/11 and all this other stuff. And he's like, so there's a distrust and there's a problem there, he said, and the left is much more welcoming of me, but I agree much more with the religious right about life. But it's like I'm not welcome.
Yeah, part of it is also there, in response to that, there was this idolization of Islam, which is also wrong. Islam...
You noticed that?
Oh yeah, oh no, I know that's there. I won't say overcorrection, because response to 9/11 was also an overcorrection. Yeah. It's just that people were trying to rush to the defense of people that didn't deserve the hate. Sure. I won't call Islam a darling religion or the religion of peace, no more than Christianity is the religion of love. A religion isn't its texts, it's its participants.
Yeah.
And so I can't pin down any one defining characteristic of any religion.
Yeah. Also hard to measure people across thousands of years.
Yeah.
How do we even know, really, what the Christians were like in 1000 AD, except for some literature we have?
Yeah.
Like, how do you, and the evidence is scant, really, of how people really were, like on daily life. So how would you even measure?
Yeah.
What about the next thing then that you were, if I understood you correctly, you were, you kind of already had an interest in like you had a secular sort of worldview already. Did you then probe, like, because you got interested in philosophy, were you interested before college? Like, were you already reading some of the philosophers before school, or before you got to university, or not really?
I have a hard time reading, so I mostly did audiobooks and stuff.
Yeah. Hey, audiobooks are impressive. If
Yeah.
you do audiobooks, I'm impressed. Anybody who does any book is impressive.
And it's also kind of hard to break into philosophy whenever you don't have a sort of basis.
Yeah.
Because a lot of philosophers, at least like some of the philosophers like Hegel,
Yeah.
they don't like to lay things out very clearly. And so, and Kant is sort of included in that group.
Well, he's the quintessential ambiguity.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so it's for some philosophy it's really difficult to get into.
Yeah.
Existentialism was an interesting, that was my sort of start for it.
Oh, okay.
Dealing with mortality and meaning in life.
Like actually through existentialists? Like,
Yeah.
okay.
I made a mistake and I started trying to read The Stranger.
Yeah.
Albert Camus, I love the idea of
Yeah.
trying to transmit ideas through allegory with like whole novels
Yeah.
of fiction. He is unbearably boring to read. It is impossible to read The Stranger because it's a man walked down the street.
Yeah.
And then he walked back from his mother's funeral. And then he went for a walk on the beach. And maybe there's something in there with how boring it is and how mundane it is, knowing Camus being an absurdist. Maybe from his perspective, it's like, look at how ridiculous all this mundanity is. But it's so hard to get through.
Yeah.
My modern approach now is mostly like reading essays.
Yeah.
Essays, I think it's a lot better than just going through books. Collections of essays are better. Reading papers.
I like short things.
Yeah.
For one, because I'd miss it. Like, if one of my principles of life is the more words someone uses to explain something, the less they probably understand it. So I'm like, give me the elevator version of what this idea is. And if they can't, then I tend to think they don't understand it. But I do apply it to myself. If someone asks me a question and I'm taking too long to answer it, I think, this means I don't understand it that well.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, I try my best not to fumble over words.
It's hard.
Yeah.
That's very hard. Can I ask you about the thing you said earlier about the people are the religion, really, more than the text.
Yeah.
I was thinking about how, like, if someone says they're a Platonist, Neo-Platonist or something, historically, I teach classics, then I do tend to associate their ideas with the ideas that I also find in Plato. And sure enough, when I read their ideas, they largely correspond to what Plato wrote. So, and plus the people who wrote the texts are people.
Yeah.
So what did you mean by that, I guess, is my question.
Part of it has to do partially with the context of self-identification, because a huge part of it is that, sorry, dry throat.
Yeah.
Part of it is I sort of came to that conclusion based off of, it has to do with self-identification mostly.
Yeah. I mean, by the way, it sounds like, I would just say it sounds kind of true to me. Like, what good would it matter if there's something written down somewhere and nobody actually does what's written down?
Yeah.
Like, what? Like, I get what your main point seems kind of obvious to me.
Yeah.
So I was kind of wondering, I'm asking, is there more to it than that? Because obviously, people who do behave according to the texts then become kind of united with the text, and then in that sense, it does sort of work that the text is the religion, I guess. But
yeah, well, but there's more to religion than just the practices. There are also other, or just the scriptures. There are other practices. Like, all of the things that happen within the Catholic Church are not described in the Bible. The way that it's structured as it is, there's a lot more, and there's a lot of tradition that goes into it.
Yes.
Like the Nicene Council Jesus didn't say to do that. And that's,
Wait, what? No,
that's sort of besides the point. But
no, I know what you mean. Of course, there's a lot added that the churches.
Yeah, there's culture built on top of it. There's
For sure.
the way that religion functions in society. It is its own group.
Yeah. The patina that's formed on top.
Yeah, and it's like there's one. It doesn't apply as much, but there was a study done that the more strict a religion is, like the more that you have to sacrifice, the better that society survives through time as its own like distinct cultural unit, and like in the face of adversity, either through persecution or like just even against the elements. Like the Amish, they have stayed the way they are for 200 years, 300 years. It's really amazing.
It is,
But that's part of it is a religion isn't just the book. And part of it is also self-identification, because part of my issue was there are thousands of different Christian sects throughout the world, and most of them look radically different from one another. Or at least the ones on the very ends, they look so different from one another. And how is it possible that they are still Christian? Like even, let's say that these groups take these bits from the Bible and ignore others, and these ones do the opposite. How can they still both be called Christian? And well, I guess the answer
Isn't that
there
what the Nicene Creed was supposed to be about?
But we still ended up with so many Christianities.
True,
that's part of it. And I think the best answer is that it is more of a cultural thing.
Although I will say this, what you're calling Christianities, I mean, most Christianities, as you're calling them, probably are going to adhere to the Nicene Creed. There's very few that reject the Nicene Creed, I think, that would identify as Christian, are there?
Yeah. Well,
so, I mean, that's a pretty, like, clear set of propositions or whatever that they believe.
Yeah. And I just threw that one in there because it was early church.
Okay.
Part of it,
That's fair.
Yeah, it's like, as we go later on, the schisms appear more and more.
Like Luther didn't create the true church. He created 100,000 different churches, right?
And that was part of it, is that he's like, well, I don't agree with indulgences and the way that you're handling purgatory. That's why he did it. And so the Nicene Creed is pretty early on in the history of the church. It's what, about 300, 400 AD?
Yes, 4th century,
4th century, okay. But ultimately, it's like the way that these Christianities have developed, I think that even with the Nicene Creed, if we were to say that that's the basis for all of the Christianities that have come, the core of it is that as these traditions and as these cultures have been built on top of these texts, ultimately the defining thing comes to be those cultures. Because ultimately that's the only thing that, well, even then it's the only thing that really keeps them together as Christian. It's what separates them and what still keeps them together as Christian.
Are you familiar with Tom Holland? You may not be. It's okay if you're not, but he's a British historian, and he's gotten some attention. He's an ancient historian and wrote a lot of books for popular consumption and became kind of famous because he's interesting to listen to on the radio and podcasts and stuff.
Only Tom Holland I know is the actor.
Yeah, I was going to say, I realized I should have said right away, not the guy that's dating the Dune girl. And so, but he wrote a book on that is for some reason it's on Dominion. Can't remember the name right now, but his argument is that he's agnostic. He says, I don't think he identifies as atheist, but he says he's agnostic on God, on the question of God. And he says that his argument is that Christianity changed the world morally, and he thinks you can't be a serious intellectual if you can't recognize that. And he said it took him a while, well past his PhD, to realize that was true. I'm putting words into his mouth, so this is always dangerous to say. He doesn't just say these words exactly, right? His basic argument, the way it's perceived is, his basic argument is, if you knew how Caesar lived or Alexander the Great and how they looked at some of the moral framework of the world, and then you look at the influence of what Christianity did to the world, he'd say you cannot compare the two. Like Christianity absolutely changed the whole world in terms of its moral impulse. And so I was hoping you had maybe read him just because I was curious what your response would be. But you haven't. That's okay.
I understand the basic argument that he's making, and I would say it does, depending on the premises that we're working with, the implicit premises, that you might be putting words in his mouth. Because it is also very true that Christianity in various forms has existed as a major source of power. Because while Christianity was a persecuted, Messianic Judaism, like really early on,
Yeah.
it did become a major political force with Constantine.
Yeah.
And I mean, with the legislation, like the legalizing of Christianity, and then now Christianity is the religion.
Yeah.
And then it develops into Catholicism, and then you have the Holy Roman Empires that are then endorsed by the Catholic Church. That is a serious point of power at the early development
For sure.
of the world.
Yeah, sure.
And so I would say it would.
I'm not asking you to respond to something you hadn't read.
Yeah.
I was curious if you had,
Yeah.
because I was really just sort of like, I'm really interested to see what you would think about his argument, just because he's an agnostic and he's not out there like trying to be an apologist.
Yeah.
To me, when you have the Christian apologists out there saying stuff, oh, surprise, surprise, they've concluded after careful study that what they think agrees exactly with what they already believed, So, and I'm just as guilty of that as anybody. But when I hear someone that's agnostic, in fact, I was telling someone this earlier in the conversation, that for me, studying the classical philosophers has had in some ways a bigger impact on my view of God in terms of like as a check, right? Even though I was largely secular growing up, like, how would I know if I was attracted to the idea of God that it wasn't just, well, you grew up in America surrounded by Christianity and you had some family that were Christian, and so surprise, surprise, you did not become a Muslim, whatever. Yeah. And but the classical philosophers have always been kind of a check to me, because Aristotle actually presented an argument for God and so on. And
I do have something on Aristotle.
Yeah.
Though.
Go ahead.
It's kind of interesting if you actually track the philosophy of the early Catholic Church with Augustine and Aquinas.
Yeah.
They essentially, I would say not Augustine, Aquinas, because Augustine, was it Augustine that gave the ontological argument?
No, that's Anselm.
That is Anselm. It's one of the A's. They have too many A's.
Too many A's.
Yeah.
Who cares about Latin?
It was Aquinas. A lot of the concepts of God that exist nowadays are evolutions on Aristotle's approach to God.
Yeah.
But that's because the concepts were essentially lifted.
Out of Aristotle, you mean?
Out of Aristotle.
Yeah. Even, by the way, that would be even more interesting to me in one sense. But I think the Bible's monotheism was not Aristotelian. It was not influenced by Aristotle.
No, it's not. Yeah. It most definitely isn't.
I mean, like Isaiah, I don't think anyone claims that Isaiah, who lived earlier, was.
But my point is that the intellectual front of Christianity was helmed by this taking of these
heavily. I think a lot of the earliest Christian writers were philosophers. It's clear that they were philosophers. Particularly the apologists, the earliest ones, and. Clearly took on board like Greek philosophical frameworks for investigating God, and the famous line from Tertullian, right, is, what does Athens have to do with Jerusalem? But then later, 1,000 years later, it's like, well, actually, Athens and Jerusalem can be married, So
yeah, but my main point in bringing up Aristotle is that the Greek philosophers' concept and exploration of God is a fundamentally impersonal force.
Yeah.
The way that they went about it with the forms and such and perfection, the way that they treated God was extremely different.
I agree.
But
classical theism is still a meaningful category for philosophers across time. Like meaning for the Christian ones, for the Islamic ones, there were Islamic philosophers, the Jewish ones, Maimonides. So there seems to be enough of a common definition, like the idea that when Aristotle says that God is thinking always about himself and that he is good, I would think most people would read that as something different from like the impersonal table. But it's also very different from Yahweh. There's differences from Yahweh. So I don't know how you account for that, but I'm just saying there seems to be enough of a commonality that it's not like two different things.
Well, I would say that the commonality would stem from, at least the modern conception of God would stem from that early adapting of Greek mythology, because at least or not Greek mythology, Greek philosophy. Because that early conception of Yahweh, at least to the extent of my knowledge, is that Yahweh, the form that Yahweh takes, early Judaism is really interesting. The way that it works. It's like, it's sort of like Hinduism in that sort of pseudo-polytheistic, like it's hard to describe because it doesn't really fit a category.
I mean, I don't really think of it that way, so you'd have to give a specific example. But
well, there are multiple forms that, at least to my knowledge, in early Judaism, there are multiple forms that God has taken, but it's still one entity. Yahweh is just one incarnation of God and one version of God. Yahweh is the war god, the god of storms.
I'm not sure where you're getting this from. Like you're talking about, like from Genesis?
Not from Genesis.
Oh,
no,
okay.
This is from.
I'm talking about like in the biblical text. The Jews were reading these like the Pentateuch and whatever.
Yeah, I'm talking about pre-Bible, and like this is.
Which text are you referring to?
I remember that
it's okay.
It's a collection. It's a collection of passed down early Jewish folklore. I don't remember where I read it, but I read through it.
But you think it predates
the assembling of like the assembling of the Torah and like the not the canonization, but like sort of the formalization of Judaism.
So I'm not sure that's just from my, I'm a classicist, so I can't pronounce on Hebrew stuff, but it's not the impression I get from reading the scholarship about Hebrew, but about the biblical text. But let's go back to your physics and philosophy, because I realized I never got to ask you specifically about you're getting into physics, and you have physics and philosophy, so you're interested in those two things combined. And you were saying, I think before the interview, that these things are not normally combined.
Yeah.
So talk about that a little bit. Like, why is that, and what do you think why are you interested in the combination, and what's the root problem there?
It's more or less the separation and non-separation is more of that philosophy as a whole field, like as its own thing, is discrete, let's just say from science. The best way to put it is that science is a particular form of philosophy, a particular form of reasoning and methodology about discovering truth about the world. Philosophy is concerned with the same thing. The scientific method and science as a group of studies, like biology, chemistry, physics, all these things, they have specific methodologies and specific ways of thinking and specific forms of logic that have become more concrete. And that we've sort of refined down. Philosophy is still kind of like the Wild West.
Right.
I think that also this sort of formalization of these types of logics and methods are more justified because we have come to find ways to verify these things to be true.
Sure, things that are not if it's non-falsifiable, right? Popper's category.
Yeah, and it's also things like physics. A big issue was measurement and repeatability. That's something that we have a more firm grasp on in the way that we work with inductive logic, for example. But we're still like in the Wild West when it comes to things like meaning. When we talk about what it means to have a meaningful life, when we still talk about things like virtue and ethics. These things there's a lot of literature on it, but there's no one concrete way to go about it.
Even the meaning of existence, you just reminded me, the very idea of existence. Aristotle's great question in Greek was "tion." What is being? Like, what is it? Like, what does it really mean?
Yeah.
But as soon as you ask what it really means, in one sense, you can do science to come at that question. But however much science you get to, there's always like another angle on it, which is philosophy, I guess.
I think the best way to put it is there's a why and there's a how. Science answers the how, and philosophy answers the why.
Sure, that's a fairly simple way to say it. Do you think then that the physicists are the ones more resistant to philosophy, or philosophy is more resistant to? That's probably too big of a question.
I would say
confirm one way or the other. My impression is physicists tend to be less interested in philosophy, and it's not quite the same the other way around. But
the way that I guess I don't want to throw scientists in a category, but whenever your approach is thinking of things like clockwork, as physics does, ultimately I don't think that it's physicists being resistant to philosophy or even scientists being resistant to philosophy. I think it's like you don't try to have an artist be a surgeon. It's a different type of personality that comes to do these things. And so my interest in philosophy and physics I do think it is kind of unique, and it's kind of niche.
It is unique. I like it.
And that's the thing. Most of the time, it's a specific type of person gets into something like physics, and a specific type of person gets into something like philosophy.
Yeah. Do you know You know the name Aaron Wall?
He sounds familiar.
Aaron Wall is a physicist at Cambridge. Before that, he was at the Advanced Institute at Princeton, which of course is where Einstein and those guys were. Not that he was there at the same time. But he has a blog called Undivided Looking, and his goal is to say that he's not just a physicist or a scientist, that there's ways of looking at the world different ways, and we don't want to divide them. So he treats philosophical, religious questions and things like that on his blog. And I'm always really fascinated by his contributions, because he's definitely one of the, like, there's no way you're a professor of physics at Cambridge without being pretty sharp. But then that you're also an advocate for what you're saying, that there's an undivided looking, there's a way that you have to contemplate the nature of reality and these kind of questions, not to mention morality and all these other things.
Even the way that we go about considering these types of things, about what perspectives and methods we should take, is itself a philosophical thing.
It is,
that's part of it.
Yeah, because science doesn't, like, strictly speaking, science doesn't justify itself. I mean, it does in an abstract way, but not in a literal way.
Yeah,
it can't.
Science is.
You need philosophy to justify the value of science itself.
Yeah, and science is an interesting approach because it uses inductive logic. And if you look at someone like Hume, all inductive logic it's invalid because it's circularly justified.
Right.
But that's also only the case if you consider, what would be the best way to put it? I would say truthhood and certainty, but that's sort of an issue for epistemology. I'm still working on that.
Sure. Who isn't?
Yeah. But part of it is that induction is probability, and trusting that something is more probably true than something else. It's an interesting ground to be in.
Yeah. I'm fascinated by probabilities more in my field because it's not even, it's history and language. And it's like people throw out their conclusions and throw around the idea of likelihood and probability all the time, analyzing, historical events. And it's like, how are you really actually arriving at the probabilities? Are you using Bayesian thinking? Are you actually doing Bayesian formulas? And the answer is no, not normally. And it's not clear even the degree to which it can apply. So it can apply at some level, but I'm just saying it gets very. So I'm interested in particularly that level. There's an atheist named. He wrote an essay called "Man Against Darkness." Walter Stace is his name. 1950s. Okay, and the article is on what created the modern world. And so this is what he does. He says, and at the end of this, I'm gonna ask sort of your response. And I'm pretty confident what he says, but it's also really worth reading. It's interesting. He says the common way you hear about science or the modern world is that the scientific revolution, these discoveries, created a insurmountable tension with religion, and people who were religious just simply couldn't hang on to these religious beliefs in the face of this storm of scientific discovery. And he says this is a fiction. This is a fiction. He thinks this is totally without any justification. It's a modern myth looking back on history. And his argument, what he claims, is that what happened is Aristotle fell out of importance between say 1500 and 1650, roughly in that time frame, right? Which is of course paralleling some major scientific discoveries. But he says there is nothing in the scientific discoveries, nothing that would affect like Aristotle's teleological thinking. He said, if anything, the discoveries and the fuel it poured onto the acceleration it gave to science, if anything, confirmed Aristotle's idea of the teleological universe, right? That things have, that they're aiming at something, and therefore science is achievable because you can follow the relationship between cause and effect. Okay, now his argument is that the death of Aristotle's teleological view, there was nothing in the scientific revolution to cause that. In terms of, like, they had an inherent conflict. Okay? And he says the reason the modern world is different is because the teleological worldview died. The Aristotelian worldview died. And he said it doesn't matter that it died in the sense that there's no going back, number one. It doesn't matter that it wasn't really actually connected to science. He said, but that has changed most people's thinking, and they create there's a fiction that science is what caused it. And he says it wasn't science. Any thought on that? Do you think, does that sound like that could be true, or is that problematic right away? Or
Well, this change in modern society, what field is he in, and what specifically
he's a
is
philosopher. He was an atheist, a philosopher, and he talks then kind of like about, you know, what's the state of the world now that we're at where we're at, and what's our future? And it's really actually a really powerful essay on sort of what he thinks, and he's quite blunt about, like, frank about what he thinks could happen and couldn't. And it's very interesting. I find it quite personally very challenging. But just the idea that you know what I mean by the teleological worldview, right? So it's, if you were talking to Neil deGrasse Tyson, you know, and you ask the question about the purpose of the universe, he's just going to right away, he's like, the universe has no purpose, you know. There's not purpose in the universe. That, of course, was not Aristotle's view. Aristotle wasn't thinking like the way Jesus thought about purpose, God, you know, the creator, and that kind of thing. But Aristotle thought things that were teleological nonetheless, that things were about something, or they were aiming at something. And that was just the nature of the universe. Like, that's just its fabric. And people use that as one of the premises for a syllogistic argument for the existence of God later, like Aquinas uses Aristotle's teleological view to then make an argument for God. And so there's this sort of resistance to anything teleological for many philosophers, and particularly physicists, who are atheistic. But I was just curious, I'm curious on just sort of like, you've never heard this before, you can go read it. This isn't a measure of anything other than just your instant reaction. Does it seem like, yeah, that could be true maybe? Or does it seem like, because if I said like a Christian apologist argued this, you know, I think a lot of people would be dismissive who were not Christians, you know. They'd just be like, oh, yes, of course they argue that. But if it's an atheist arguing it, you know, they're not like trying to defend, you know, Aristotle or anything. He's not interested in that. He's just interested in the history. Yeah. And so I was just curious if you had an instant reaction to it, because I don't get to ask many people with your academic context that you could even respond to it. So
I would say, at the very least, it seems that it could be not a direct cause, but a comorbidity. This approach to
morbidity.
Well, the way that you think about science isn't teleological. It's not searching for like what is the intent behind it. It's more of a like.
And teleological doesn't have to mean intent so much. It just means that things tend toward an end. Like when you strike a match, it tends toward fire. You don't expect it to produce water.
Yeah.
You know, that's all that Aristotle meant, is that things are directed toward an end, built into the very fabric of nature. Science wouldn't work if it wasn't, right?
Yeah. I'm going to look it up just to be sure, because teleological is one of those words. I can remember ontological, but I can't remember teleological.
Well, telos is just the Greek word for end or goal, but it can just mean end as in the point at which something aims. It doesn't mean there has to be an aimer. Do you know what I'm saying by that? I mean, someone could you could argue for that, but that's not Aristotle's view.
Okay.
Go ahead. Yeah. Go ahead. If you don't have a reaction, I've already probably gone on too long. It's okay. Yeah. I just thought I have someone here that I'm really curious, because I read this essay with students every year, and I'm always fascinated at sort of their responses to it.
Well,
and in the same way, I'm interested when I read Dante with Protestant students to see their reaction to Dante, right?
Yeah.
Anyway, go ahead. What were you going to say?
So is the argument that he's making that this stopping of teleological thinking is responsible for this shift? That things aren't tending towards a specific
Yes.
end?
There's not a built-in nature to the universe that things are directed toward some end. The universe is at bottom random. So things that seem ordered or teleological are just giving the appearance. And you can imagine like people like the famous watchmaker argument, where that's making a teleological argument, right? It's using teleology or of what is considered a teleological feature of the world, and then trying to use that as a premise toward the conclusion that God exists. Stace is not interested in any of this kind of stuff. In his paper,
I still think, well, with the thing with it's either teleology or it's randomness.
Yeah.
I wouldn't say that's necessarily the case.
Okay.
It still seems that the universe does operate by some basic laws.
Yeah.
I would actually say it could appear random, but there is a set of laws that define it very well that we can even predict.
And
I would say
they could coexist. You mean in some way?
Yeah.
It's not a door number one, door number two.
I would say that that lack of teleological thinking, I would still call it a comorbidity, because science gives us a different way to conceptualize how things go about in the universe.
Yeah.
It doesn't set out a way of thinking. Well, it does have its own logic, but the conclusions that it derives is that the world follows some sort of pattern. It does have some sort of order
Which it
underlying.
seems to.
It seems
just
to,
generally, like we just things are predictable, right? We wouldn't be able to predict the weather if they didn't have some kind of pattern to them. But it's real popular to sort of think of things as more random, even though we're still looking for laws and cause and effect and stuff. It's okay. I just was curious if you had heard about it, and then I thought, well, I'm going to just try and give you the basic thing to see if you have a reaction to it. I think you had a pretty good reaction.
Yeah, but I would just say there that complexity isn't necessarily randomness.
For sure.
Yeah, because I wanted to bring it up as one of my favorite.
That's why teleology is not just complexity. Yeah.
Because part of it is like, I guess it's not really applicable to bring up now, but Conway's Game of Life is a great example of complexity deriving from simple rules.
Yeah.
There's only 4 rules in Conway's Game of Life,
Yeah.
And people build computers in Conway's Game of Life. It's amazing. People have built the Game of Life in the Game of Life. Literally, it performs.
Wild,
It's amazing.
Yeah.
And so if there's all this complexity about it.
Yeah. Do you find when you're
Sorry, go ahead.
Do you find when you're reading like the philosophers, or you're reading someone from 300 years ago, 800 years ago, that sometimes you just think these people weren't idiots? Like there's some real thoughtfulness here that is not so easily dismissed. I always feel like the philosopher I'm reading is the one I feel most persuaded by, as long as they're clear.
I think a big part of it is that philosophers do, at least the ones that have survived the test of time, have done a very good job of staying consistent, and consistent in that, I mean, what's the best way to put it? They do a good job of thinking around things.
Yeah.
Part of it is that I don't think that they're stupid. Like there's philosophers that have said things that I've disagreed with, but I by no means think that they're idiots. The big thing is that an argument is built off of premises and the logic. Philosophers have always done a very good job, at least the ones, like I said, that have survived the test of time, have done a very good job with the logic, but we're all restricted by the premises part. We have to play the hand we're dealt, and every time we play that hand, we put more cards in the pool that someone else can draw from. And so ultimately, I do think they're very good at thinking about things, and they came to the best conclusions that they could.
That's a pretty good way to say it. I liked your analogy of just you get the hand you're dealt. You live at a particular generation, and whatever the conclusions were of the time. And I mean, the ancient world was the same. It's not like they weren't pursuing the inductively even at some level. They were at least proto-scientific, you know. and I'm talking about the world I'm studying, classical world. Well, we've gotten a bit far afield, but because of your interest, I kind of moved away from your biography there and just wanted to hear a little more about some of your opinions about those things, because there's just, do you find it a little, like, would you expect in a context like an SSA conference to find a ton of people that were really, like, studying philosophy at some level and really trying to think critically? Because philosophy is ultimately teaching people how to think.
Yeah.
Is that sort of what you find in the trenches, that people are really learning how to think critically, and even reading the logicians and the philosophers? They're reading Gödel and whatever, or is it more like not much?
Actually, I've found like a surprising number of people that are interested in philosophy are also interested in the SSA, or they're in the SSA, or at the very least they're atheists.
Yeah.
I would also say that
But that was asking the reverse question, right? As far as SSA people, how many of them are interested in, whatever, taking logic classes or something?
Well, lots. A lot of people are involved with that. A lot of people, we talk philosophy all the time at our meetings.
Yeah. Do you ever do like logic classes, or try to think of doing like a?
That was one of my presentations that I gave.
Oh, it was?
Yeah.
Oh, there you go.
Yeah, I did a mini thing on formal logic.
Yeah. Do you think that's common in the SSA chapters, or more because you're philosophy?
I've seen it around.
Science and philosophy.
I've seen it around a little bit.
Yeah.
So I do think it is more common than I expected.
Yeah.
I will also say that if it wasn't, I wouldn't be surprised. The SSA exists as a gathering for non-religious and secular students.
Yeah.
And so it's like a lot of Christian groups, they meet but they don't talk apologetics.
Right. That's right.
Yeah.
It's a minority.
Yeah.
And some Christian schools, study logic, but most Christian churches aren't having logic classes.
Yeah.
But then there are people who do apologetics and they're teaching logic, think it's important. So, yeah.
But I do find it disproportionately high in the Secular Student Alliance is talking about these sort of things and these concepts. Most of the time, because because what it means to be an atheist is only a small part of being secular, because that's only one belief.
Yeah,
that a group of
it's a
people
negative belief, right?
Well, not even a negative belief. Most of the time, it's a non-belief. It's because some people.
I meant negative, meaning that's what I meant.
Sorry.
It's a lack of belief.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of stuff we don't believe.
Sorry.
The question is,
Yeah. I have sort of there's a tri-state logic to it, that people can believe. They can believe the opposite, and then there's people who lack a belief about it.
Oh, yeah. I see what you mean. Yeah.
Yeah.
I just meant negative as in it's not a positive, like a propositional belief. It's just it's something you don't believe in, so it doesn't really get you very far. So you got a lot more to talk. You have a lot of, as you're trying to say, there's a lot to talk about. There's not much. Atheism doesn't get you very far as organizing a society, or, whatever, shaping what your ultimate values are. So.
Yeah, it's one aspect, and there's a lot more discussion to be had. And I know that there's a lot of shows that I would watch on YouTube. I know that they would often meet. Like the Atheist Experience, they would, before COVID, they would meet more often. They would go out to bars and have philosophy nights and stuff like that.
Oh, yeah.
It was always a fun time.
Yeah.
But
is that one of your favorite YouTube type podcast shows?
I haven't. Well, I have to trace the timeline. Matt Dillahunty became a little harder to watch later on.
Okay.
He got jaded. Everybody goes through it because he spent years doing the same thing, getting the same responses, and he started building a script in his mind. But overall, it's been a good show to watch.
Okay.
And they've improved a little bit.
Have you moved on to another one then?
I don't engage too much more with it. I try to do my own stuff. So I've been writing brochures and stuff, or little zines, mini essays and stuff like that.
And of course, for your own consumption, you're actually, with your studies, you're actually consuming physics and philosophy and stuff. So you're already just naturally reading stuff. I mean, for my part, the YouTube world is pretty lowbrow.
It is.
And I say that, though I'm putting this on YouTube. But I mean, generally speaking, it's pretty, if you really want to understand the philosophy of stuff, you actually have to. Now, if you find a real philosopher, right, who's being interviewed on YouTube, which increasingly they are doing that. They're realizing they need to be out kind of educating the public. So you can find some great philosophers and their interviews and stuff, and they're way you know,
it's much high quality content.
Yeah, and then you end up realizing, okay, I need to read some real stuff now.
Yeah.
So, well, I'd love to talk more, but this is great. Really enjoyed it.
Yeah, I did too.
Yeah.